Hello everyone, I am Nikita from CSSC and I am currently pursuing my Bachelor of Technology in National Institute of Technology, Bhimvaram. So now I am going to explain about a topic called closure, which is a very powerful concept in JavaScript. Suppose if we have a function inside another function, and even when the outer function finishes its execution, the inner function still remembers and it still has an access to the variables from that outer function. So this is nothing but called as a closure. So now let us discuss the concept of closure by taking a simple example. So this is my overall code for closure. So here what happens is, so we created a function called outer function, and in this outer function, it takes a variable, let's say outside, and then it returns to the inner function. So this is the function of inner function. Now this inner function has access to two things. That is, it has its own variable called inner variable and the outer variable from outer function. So even after outer function is done, the inner variable remembers that outer variable is outside, and this happens because of closure. So when we call a function closure function with inside, we get the following output like output outside and inside. So let us run this code. So node space closure.js. So this is displaying that outer variable outside and inner variable inside. So this is the overall concept of closure. So now let us take another example for closure. So here I am creating a function called create counter, and I'm initializing a variable called count and initializing it to 0, and then I'm returning function count plus return count. So yeah, here I'm creating const variable called counter, and I'm calling my function. Here I'm writing console.log, and I'm calling my variable. So yeah, so here what happens is I created a function called create counter, and it has a variable called count, and and I'll initialize this count to 0. So this variable is private. That means you cannot access it directly from outside. Instead, it is remembered by the return function due to the closure. So each time we call closure, the inner function increases count and then it returns its value. Suppose for the first console of log, the initial value of count is 0, and after incrementing by 1, the count will be number 1. So for this statement, the output is 1. That means the output is 1, and then now the count value is 1. So if we again call the counter function, then the count 1 is increased by 1. That means the output for this is 2. Likewise, the output for this is 3. So yeah, let us run this code again. So node space closure.js. So sorry, I forgot to say. Yeah, node closure.js. Yeah, the output is 1, 2, and 3. So now we'll discuss about the topics which will handle the asynchronous operations, which are called as callbacks, promises, and asynchronous functions or await. So these are the situations where code doesn't run in a straight and sequential line. So let us start by discussing about what is callback function. So, yeah, so this is my code for callback. So what is callback? A callback is simply a function passed as an argument to the another function, and which is then executed after some operation is completed. So this is the most basic way to handle the asynchronous tasks. So here is my example program for callback, and Yeah. So in this code, I created a function called get data. So this get data fetches data with a set timeout function. Here, the set timeout represents an asynchronous operation, and after 2 seconds, it logs data fetched message. I have written it in this, and then it processes the callback function in this scene. So, and again, we call the callback function. The callback ensures that the process data runs only after the data has been fetched. So here in this case it is process data, and again I have created a function called process data, and then I printed the message called processing data, and here I called my get data function. So when to use callbacks? So callbacks are great for simple asynchronous tasks, but they are led to callback hell when you have multiple asynchronous operations that depend on each other. So, in those cases, the code can become deeply nested and hard to read. So, now let us run this code node space callback dot js. Yeah, it is printing the message called data fetch and then processing data. So now let us discuss about another one which is called as promises. So here what is promise? So a promise is an object that represents the eventual completion or failure of an asynchronous operation. So promises provides a cleaner and more structured way to handle the asynchronous operations compared to the callbacks. So a promise can be in one of these three states: pending and fulfilled and rejected. So in the pending stage, the operation is still in a progress, and in the fulfilled stage, it represents that the operation is completed successfully, and in the rejected stage, the operation is failed. So let us take an example. Yeah, so this is my example code for promises. Here, let us see how this code works. I have created a function called fetch data. So this fetch data returns a promises. Inside the promises, there is a set timeout. So this is an asynchronous operation that simulates the asynchronous tasks. So if the operation is successful, the promises is resolved with a success message. So yeah, success message data fetched successfully, which is then handled by dot then message, dot then function. And if it is fails, the promise is rejected, and the error is caught by the function called dot catch. And when so if promises are useful when you need to handle the multiple asynchronous tasks in a more readable way, you can change the dot them methods to handle sequential operations without deeply nesting callbacks. So this is one of the main advantages which is present in promises. Suppose if we run this code node promises.js. So yeah, it is printing data fetched successfully, and so the next one in this is async function. So async or await is built in on top of promises, and it provides an even more cleaner and more readable way to handle the asynchronous operations. So it allows you to write asynchronous code as if it were synchronous, making and it will also make easier to understand the code. So now let us take an example for this. So yeah, this is my example for a program for asynchronous. So let us see how this code works. So here I have written a function called fetch data. So this get and another asynchronous function called get data. So this get data function is marked with async function, which means it can use the await keyword also. So the await keyword pauses the function until the promise returned by the fetch data is resolved or rejected. So if the promise is resolved, then it displays a message called data fetched successfully, and if the promise is rejected, then it displays a message called error fetching data. So if the promise is resolved, it logs the success message. That means this function is this print statement is used for this. If the promise is rejected, the catch block this catch block will handle this error and it will print error fetching data. So if we have to use await or async functions when you want a clean and readable code that will handle the synchronous tasks in a more sequential way other than the callback and promises. So it's perfect for avoiding nested dot then and chains and makes errors handling easier, and it will be very easy by using this try and catch blocks. So now let us run this code. Node space async.js. So yeah, this is displaying data fetched successfully. So let's see how we can implement a to-do list by using closures. So closures allow us to create functions with private data, which means our to-do list can have its own state and functionality without interfering with the rest of our code. So let us see how this code works. So this is overall my to-do list code. So let's see how this code works. And first of all, the to-do list means in this implementation, we used a concept called closures to keep our to-do list private while exposing the functions we need to interact with the list. So let us understand this codes and let me explain how this code works. So first of all, I created a function called to-do list. In this list, so we create a function called to-do list. Inside this function we have a variable called all. So this means the variable is a list that stores all of our list of to-dos. Because it is inside of to-do list function, this all is private. That means no outside code can directly modify this all. This is the power of closures. Only the functions we return will be able to access this all. And then I added I created a variable called const. So this add function is responsible for adding a new to-do item to our list. So we pass a to-do item object, and this function pushes and then this function pushes to the all array. With closures, add has access to all array even though it's defined outside the main function. And then I have created a function called mark as complete, and this function allows us to mm, allows us to mark a to-do item as complete by modifying its completed status. Again, it has access to the all array through the closure, so it can modify the status of any item in the list. And then we have created a function called overdue. Let's see how we can handle different types of to-dos based on the due dates. So this function checks each to-do item to see if its due dates is before today. If it is before today, we consider it as an overdue. And next we write a function const function called a due today, and this due today function means this function represents the to-dos which are due for today. That means this function filters the to-dos that are exactly due for today. And later we have created a function for due later. This function grabs the to dos that are due after the tomorrow. So this whole function is for due later. And then we created a const function called to displayable list. And so this block is for to displayable list. So this function formats the list of to-dos into a nice string format that we can display. So here is what happening. So for each item, it checks if it is due today and hides the data if it is and hides the date if it is. So it adds a checkbox. It will add a tick. So here it will add a checkbox for completed, and for incomplete it will just leave a list. um, Finally it joins all the formatted to do items into a single strings that can be printed, and then we return all this, all add mark as complete, overdue, over today, due today, due later, and to displayable list. And then at the bottom of the code, after this, at the bottom of the code, we create and manipulate the to-do list. So here we are manipulating and creating the to-do list. So now we are adding the several to-do lists with different due dates, and then we will filter them and then we will display them. So this to-dos dot add will add the to-dos into our list. So let us add to-dos dot add. Title is submit assignment and due date is yesterday. That and the completed status is false. That means it is not completed yet. And then we added a to-do list called title with title, parent, due date is today, and completed is true. True means it is completed. And then we added to-dos.add title service vehicle, due date is today, completed is false. And then likewise we added several to-do lists and then we printed them. So here all this we added several to-do lists with different due dates, and then we will filter, and then we filtered them and we'll display them. So based on the current date, the program prints the overdue, due today, and due later tasks in the format. So let us run this program. Node space index.js. So yeah, this is our output. Uh, if we see here, for this to-do list, completed is false. So it is just printing the date of yesterday, and it remains the same. And here for this to-do list, completed is true. That means it is completed in due date is today. So it will print X. Suppose let us change this to true and we'll save this, and again we'll run this. Now here both will be paid, so that means this symbol is printed. So this approach will give you clean and modular to-do list with private data using closures to encapsulate all array and related functions. So overall, what we have done is we used a closure to keep the list of to-dos private. We built helper functions like add, mark as complete, overdue, due today, due and due later to manage this list. Finally, we formatted and displayed the list using two displayable lists. So it's a great technique for maintaining a clean, organized, and modular code. So thank you.